Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Thomas Mockaitis, who's a professor of history at DePaul University, who has taught counterterrorism courses for the past 13 years at venues around the world as part of the United States Department of Defense Counterterrorism Fellowship Program. He's the author of 6 books, including New Terrorism, Myths and Reality, Violent Extremists, Understanding the Domestic and International Terrorist Threat, and Iraq and the Challenge of Counterinsurgency. And he has an article at The Hill, Biden Was Right. MAGA Ideology is Fascism. Welcome to Background Briefing, Thomas Mockaitis.
Thank you.
So, Tom, you've spent many, many years writing about extremism and teaching courses on Germany under the Third Reich. And obviously, the word fascism is, as a pejorative, is thrown around often fairly loosely. But more and more, it seems to be becoming an acceptable description of Trump and his MAGA movement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I want to be really clear from the outset. Like the president, I am not branding all Republicans and not even all those who supported Trump as fascists. What I'm saying is the ideology very clearly fits the definition of fascism as it was constructed in the first couple of decades, first 4 decades of the 21st century. It's just really hard to not see what is fairly glaring similarities.
Well, as you write, violence is a stock in trade of fascists, and certainly former President Trump has a lot of support from the Oath Keepers, the 3%ers and the Proud Boys. And of course, the 3%ers take that name, the 3%, from the notion that only 3% of the American people supported the American Revolution against the British. So they're basically saying that, it only takes a handful of revolutionaries to change the country. There's lots of talk from those far-right groups of civil war. Even the Senator Lindsey Graham recently warned that if Trump is indicted, there could be riots in the street. So from the point of view of those holding the line against fascism, what do they do? What do the FBI and the DOJ do? They're trying to uphold the law. At the same time, they're being intimidated, and Trump is absolutely vilifying FBI agents. So the idea that they somehow should change their ways so that there isn't a civil war is an admission of failure, is it not? It's a capitulation.
First of all, the 3%er claim is absolute nonsense. In addition to being an historian, I'm a Revolutionary War reenactor, and it was closer to 30% who supported it. It's still a minority, but these claims that they're the vanguard of this large movement is very problematic. They're not only warning of civil war, they're painting a target circle on the back of the very law enforcement that they constantly claim to be upholding. When you essentially are in a sense egging them on, vilifying them, saying look at what they're doing and so on, and it's translated into real threats. And that is the kind of intimidation the Nazi bully boys did on the streets, the brown shirts, in Germany in the 1930s, and it really should stop. Well, law enforcement is responding the way that it has no choice but to. It's hardening its sights, it's warning its officials, it's preparing to respond to defend law and order in the United States as best it can.
But Trump himself has shown that he has a kind of, if not a love of violence, certainly a fascination. He watched the storming of the Capitol, refused to do anything to stop it, and apparently enjoyed watching the insurgents beat the hell out of the Capitol Police. And, when he was earlier in his 2016 campaigning in Suffolk County, New York, he told the local police at a big gathering, when you put a suspect in the back of the car, don't put your hand on his head, let him bash his head against. And at rallies, he threatened the few demonstrators and hecklers, take them out, I'll pay the bills, etc.
Yeah.
What's your sense of this guy? He's only interested in himself, but at the same time, we're now learning, for example, that he refused to leave the White House. I mean, he didn't want to leave. I mean,
yeah. Well, that's all of that is at the heart of the investigation being done by the January 6th committee in the Department of Justice. And, they'll have to determine whether there's enough there to, actually warrant an indictment. But again, what fascist dictators claimed was that, they were the embodiment of the people. They knew better than anybody else. I understand the system, Trump said, I alone can fix it. It's very much similar to comments made by Benito Mussolini and also by Adolf Hitler. Now, I'm not saying there's a direct moral equivalency there, but there are disturbing similarities that, I'm the man on the white horse. And as a dear friend of mine used to say, the man on the white horse is always followed by a mob of men in brown shirts. And unfortunately, that's become a really serious worry in the country. And even more so is the way in which the Republican Party has caved in, to his behavior and simply refuses to challenge him or even to stand up for, for law and order in many cases.
Well, it's obvious that Trump has sympathies, if not affections, for totalitarian, authoritarian leaders, and in particular for a murderous dictator, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un. I mean,
and also in Viktor Orban, who spoke at a conservative political action committee recently, the president of Hungary, who has really curtailed civil liberties and open democracy in that country, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Narendra Modi in India. Unfortunately, this and for fairly right-wing movements in Europe and elsewhere. So yes, this is unfortunately a worldwide phenomenon that is a cause for great concern.
So, Tom Mockaitis, apparently, I've heard rumors that Trump will be indicted after the elections. If that were to happen, and as I mentioned earlier, Senator Lindsey Graham warned that mobs would take to the streets, how close are we to, how real is this threat of civil war? Because we know that a lot of Trump's supporters have arms, and we know from polling that I think it's something like 40% feel that violence is inevitable and necessary. So how would you rate the chances? Because again, this man he's cornered now because he's done the most outrageous thing with, God knows what he's done with these incredibly important national security secrets, some of them involving, or at least one of them involving another country, which could be the state of Israel. So it's absolutely appalling what he's doing with, holding on to state secrets under the most absolutely reckless lack of security. So assuming that he's pulled over, as he should be, in the case of these stealing government documents, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think there'll be large-scale eruptions in this country?
I don't really know, because people said that after the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the search of Mar-a-Lago, it was perfectly legal and it was done appropriately and with, reasonable evidence that they would find what they in fact found. There were isolated incidents and so on, but the threat level rose, and the director of the FBI did inform, field officers and agents that they had to be vigilant and not take their safety for granted and so on. You could see demonstrations. I don't know how widespread they would be. To be fair, as with any movement, those who embrace the ideology, only a small percentage will actually endorse violence. And although you said, a larger percentage said that they saw violence as inevitable and necessary, doesn't mean they'll do it. It's the small percentage, but that small percentage is very well armed and very well organized as well. And so I would not put a tax on officials and facilities out of order. I do not expect to see millions of people taking to the streets and in a kind of expressing moral outrage if he were to be indicted.
But one of the things he's likely to do, and a previous guest on today's program brought this up, is that he's likely to declare himself a candidate for president in order to get some protection from the DOJ. So how will that complicate the mix?
Well, I don't know that it gives him protection. It certainly creates. He's trying to create an appearance of political persecution, and that it would help him perhaps in the public relations battle. But there's no legal status to being a candidate that protects you, from indictment if in fact you are perceived to have committed a crime. So it'll give him, the bully pulpit and so on, and it creates something of a dilemma in that, candidates are usually given Secret Service protection. And the question is, at what point would that kick in? I don't know. But it's not going to stop things. But it's going to allow him to spin it the way he is. But on the other hand, it's not clear how well that's going to play. The results of the primary season are not entirely encouraging for Republicans. He's endorsed some far-right candidates who, they won their primary, but now they're behind in the general election, where a more moderate Republican might easily have won. And so we'll have to see how it plays out. But I don't think I expect him to declare his candidacy. I don't think it's going to shield him from action by the Justice Department.
Well, Tom Mockaitis, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Happy to do it.
And again, I've been speaking with Thomas Mockaitis, who's a professor of history at DePaul University, who has taught counterterrorism courses for the past 13 years at venues around the world as part of the U.S. Department of Defense's Counterterrorism Fellowship Program. He's the author of 6 books, including New Terrorism, Myths and Reality, Violent Extremists, Understanding the Domestic and International Terrorist Threat, and Iraq and the Challenge of Counterinsurgency. And he has an article at The Hill, Biden Was Right. MAGA ideology is fascism. This has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producer Graham Fitzgibbon. And to help us sustain this program into the future and assure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate or publictruthmedia.org, where you will find our non-profit Public Truth Media Foundation, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And if you missed any of today's program and would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we'll include extended interviews searchable by topic and have made it easy for you to sign up for daily email updates that provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we also encourage your ratings and reviews on these platforms. Find us on Twitter and Facebook at Ian Masters Media. And please do help us reach more listeners by sharing this program with friends, family, and colleagues. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Background Briefing at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.
The guy that lived next door in 305 took the kids to the park and disappeared by 9:30.